So if you guys follow the news, it's probably been impossible to ignore the stories about Ezra Miller, who has been kind of like terrorizing communities in Hawaii. And now recently there's an even more bizarre story coming out involving a Hawaiian family. Now Ezra Miller has a history of some like run-ins with the law, but nothing like that serious or to the seriousness of these recent stories over the last year. So what I want to do today is talk about what Ezra Miller has been doing in Hawaii, but link it to the overall problems in Hawaii, including how white Americans have historically treated Hawaii, including Mark Zuckerberg, how the US military have treated Hawaii, and the really like devastating impacts on the native community, and how native Hawaiian women in particular are real victims of a lot of things to do with trafficking or being forced to work in like illegal sex industries. Because I think that is kind of like the fabric of this Ezra Miller story, who did, it seemed, originally go to Hawaii to actually protest against this type of neo-colonialism going on there. So all of that coming up for you today. Before we go any further, please like the video to support it. And I guess in the comments, I can't really think of anything because this topic is very serious. I guess I'm curious though, how are Americans taught about Hawaii in school? Because a lot of you guys are American, and I've had arguments with Americans who say the colonization of Hawaii and it becoming part of the US is actually a benefit to them. I mean, it was probably a benefit to all the European settlers living there. It's pretty clear if you read into it, even on a surface level, it hasn't been beneficial to native Hawaiians by and large. So let me know down in the comments. Also, this type of video is demonetized, so I can talk about these serious issues. So consider support me on Patreon. I want to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and the benefits of that are getting access to my Nintendo Switch friend code and access to the private patrons Discord server. Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram. Subscribe to my second channel, the Kavernacle Extra, where I archive all my live streams, and check out the subreddit down in the description. So because I want to make this video about the broader treatment of natives in Hawaii, I don't want to start completely with Ezra Miller. I just want to talk about Hawaii in general. But yeah, the notion that the American and European colonization of Hawaii, the Christianization of Hawaii, and it becoming a US state has been beneficial to native Hawaiians is completely laughable when natives in Hawaii, even ones that are employed, are in disproportionate poverty compared to white Hawaiians, also having like their land consistently taken away and poisoned by the US military, because like most people at least know Hawaii for Pearl Harbor and things like that. And it always makes me laugh when you argue with even some liberal Americans who seem to think America hates imperialism or America hates colonialism. Didn't America only begin as 13 states? How do you think the rest joined up? How do you think things like Puerto Rico became part of America? How do you think places like Hawaii became part of America? It's not even that close to America. Of course it was through colonization, genocide, disgusting treatment of native groups, and that is kind of like the fabric of what we're dealing with. But just to talk about some recent stories to do with Hawaii, and then linking that into Ezra Miller originally going over there to protest with Jason Momoa, his co-star from the Justice League films, who is actually from Hawaii. So one of the more recent ones is the US military poisoning the land in Hawaii. And this doesn't just affect native Hawaiians, but of course it does affect them too. So this was from back in January. The US military is polluting Hawaii's water supply and denying it. This fuel facility is not the 8th one of the world. It's Frankenstein's monster, and we have to kill it before it kills us. This is a plea from Marty Townsend, one of the more than 1,000 Hawaii residents urging the Honolulu City Council to take action to protect our island's most important resource, fresh and clean water. The Frankenstein's monster is the US Navy's Red Hill fuel storage facility, a massive underground farm of 18 million litre fuel tanks and pipes just 100 feet above metropolitan Oahu. Its construction began before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Since then, it's leaked over 180,000 gallons of petroleum into the groundwater aquifer that provides drinking water for over 400,000 residents and visitors. Despite its long-standing threat to water systems, this decrepit facility has been used until operations were paused in late November 2021 after hundreds of military families reported rashes, headaches, nausea, vomiting, and symptoms of petroleum poisoning. The Navy denied these facts for days. We have no immediate indication that the water is unsafe to drink, their representatives said, even after the Navy had quietly shut down its own drinking water well. Pearl Harbor's commander even told the community of sick families, pregnant women, and nursing mums that my staff and I are drinking the water on the base. Hawaii's health department finally stepped in, advising Navy water system users not to drink their tap water. A military spouse in our legal proceedings this week sobbed as she described the family dog rejecting its water. Another mother teared up as she remembered her infant child vomiting constantly after the Navy advised her that the water was safe. The Navy's assistant secretary, in his testimony from the nation's capital, even had the gall to complain that he'd missed that night's weekly American football game. So it's safe to say, if that US Navy base was located in a part of America which had a lot of wealthy white people being poisoned by petroleum in their drinking water, you know they would do something. You know they would have handled the situation far better, and they wouldn't be saying that these people are inconveniencing them for complaining about the US Navy poisoning clean water in Hawaii. But that is just the way the US treats its colonies. It's the way it treats Puerto Rico in certain regards. It's the way it's always treated its foreign overseas territories. So probably not surprising they still treat it like a colony. But also, Hawaii has become an obsession for Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of now Meta, which owns Facebook. And he has been buying up land, and if people don't sell it to him, well, he sues them. So Hawaiians call Mark Zuckerberg the face of neocolonialism over land lawsuits. His lawsuits have prompted a backlash from locals who placed the billionaire within a long, painful history of Western conquest and native Hawaiian dispossession. This is the face of neocolonialism, said Kapue Sproat, a law professor at the University of Hawaii who's originally from the area. Even though a forced sale may not physically displace people, it's the last nail in the coffin of separating us from the land. For us native Hawaiians, the land is an ancestor, it's a grandparent. You don't just sell your grandmother. So we've seen a lot of billionaires buying up a lot of land recently, but imagine how racist you have to be to go to Hawaii with this awful history of Western colonization and basically sue people to sell their land to you when you know the land is very important in their culture. But that's just indicative of how the US generally has treated its colonies, and Hawaii has suffered greatly at the hands of corporate interests for hundreds of years, and of course the US government itself. Now, this type of thing has of course prompted a lot of protests in America itself, and Jason Momoa, like I said, and Ezra Miller actually were protesting against stuff like this. And this is where Ezra Miller and Hawaii kind of comes into the picture. So this is back in 2019 as well. Justice League's Ezra Miller has joined Jason Momoa's protest on Hawaii. The DCEU superhero team may have broken up on the big screen, but this doesn't mean they aren't fighting for causes they care about on their off days. Aquaman star Jason Momoa has been protesting the sacred mountain of Mauna Kea in his native Hawaii from becoming a building site for a $1.4 billion project, 30-meter telescope. Ezra Miller, who played Flash alongside Momoa's Aquaman, has also joined his activism. And there is Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa protesting. The two Justice League co-stars have become good friends outside their DC project, and now it looks like Ezra Miller journeyed to Hawaii to support a cause Momoa is fighting hard for his fellow Hawaiian natives. It's Hawaii's tallest mountain and a dormant volcano, and the building site to a massive telescope for scientists to study dark matter, black holes and such. However, the community wishes their sacred mountain not be touched in the preservation of their culture. Over the weekend, thousands of protesters came to the mountain to block the main road. They've managed to halt construction for about a month as it was supposed to begin in mid-July. Supporters have been flashing the hand gesture Momoa and Miller posed within the picture to show their support. The mountain is said to be the height of native Hawaiians' ancestral ties to creation. Nice of Ezra Miller to actually do something for a good cause and be culturally sensitive as well, because this is important to native Hawaiian culture. However, like you guys will all know, Ezra Miller has been getting into serious run-ins with the law in Hawaii this year, and for whatever reason they are doing this. It's clear they need some sort of help, and I think the police need to treat them more seriously, but because they're a wealthy Hollywood star, they seem to be getting away with a lot of this stuff, and it is pretty crazy what Ezra Miller has been up to. So if you haven't been following it properly, Nylon has a good breakdown. So a breakdown of Ezra Miller's run-ins with the law. So we're just going to go through all of them, and then I'm going to back up and talk about the more important ones to this overall video. So in April 2020, Miller appeared to choke a woman at a bar. A video surfaced of Miller appearing to choke a woman in a bar in Reykjavik, Iceland in April 2020. The video shows Miller saying, "Oh, you want to fight? That's what you want to do," to a young woman who appears to be jokingly prepared herself for a fight. Miller then grabs her by the throat and throws her to the ground. According to a source at the bar, this all took place after Miller was confronted by a group of eager fans. March 7th to 28th, 2022, various incidents of disorderly conduct in Hawaii. It's unclear how much time Miller spent in Hawaii, but they were accused of committing several minor offences there. Police say Miller was the source of at least 10 calls since March the 7th, mostly for minor offences like filming people at a gas station, refusing to leave the sidewalk area of a restaurant, and arguing with people. March 28th, arrested in Hawaii for disorderly conduct at a bar. On the evening of March 27th, the actor was arrested for harassment and disorderly conduct at a karaoke bar. What set Miller off? Per the Hawaii police, Miller was aggravated with people singing Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper's Shallow from 2018 to Star is Born. Miller was apparently yelling obscenities, grabbed the mic from a singing woman, and lunged at a man playing darts, according to the police. They were released after paying a $500 bail. In the video, Miller says they deliberately film themselves for the purpose of creating NFT crypto art. "I got assaulted and I started filming. Let me show you the video," the actor says in the video. "I got assaulted in this bar twice in a row. I film myself when I get assaulted for NFT crypto art." So it only gets more bizarre and worse from there. March 29th, a couple gets a restraining order. According to the AP, 2 Hawaii residents accused Miller of breaking into their bedroom and stealing their passports and wallets. On March 29th, the couple filed a petition asking the court for a temporary restraining order. According to The Independent, the complaint says Miller burst into the bedroom of the petitioners and threatened the alleged male victim by saying, "I will bury you and your slut wife." The restraining order was later dropped. Gets it even worse. Miller reportedly threw a chair at a 26-year-old woman, striking her in the head on April 19th, according to a police report. According to the report, police responded to a call about an assault at a party and said Miller became irate after being asked to leave and reportedly threw a chair, striking a 26-year-old female in the forehead, resulting in a half-inch cut. Miller was later arrested after police found them on the roadway during a traffic stop. June 8th, 2022, and this is what I'm going to talk about a bit more. According to TMZ, based on a new legal document, 18-year-old Tokata Ionized met Miller in 2016 when she was just 12 and he was 23, while the actor was visiting the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota. Her parents say they formed a friendship that put her at risk and claim the actor supplied her with alcohol, marijuana, and LSD. The parents say Miller told Ionized to go by the name Gibson and took her car keys and credit cards. This seriously reminds me of so many abuse cases I've read. It reminds me a lot of how R. Kelly treated certain women. So June 10th, court cannot serve or locate Miller, although the parents of 18-year-old Ionized have obtained the protective order against Miller. In a June 9th interview with the LA Times, Dakota's father, Chase Ionized, said to the court, "I have no idea of knowing where they are to gain help from other jurisdictions or to enforce the order." June 16th, court grants 12-year-old harassment protective order against Miller. The family of a 12-year-old child in Greenfield, Massachusetts has accused Miller of acting inappropriately and harassing them one evening in their downstairs neighbor's home, and on Wednesday were granted a temporary protection order. This harassment prevention order stems from encounters between the 12-year-old, their mother, and a downstairs neighbor who is in a band with some of Miller's friends. According to the Daily Beast, Miller claimed that the board game Pachisi was rooted in Rastafarian culture. When the neighbor questioned Miller about this claim, they allegedly screamed into their face before opening up their jacket to reveal a gun and said, "Talking like that could get you into a really serious situation." So obviously Ezra being an absolute menace to Hawaii, and the stuff with young children is especially very, very disturbing, but it's clear there is something up with them. And if people need restraining orders against you for your actions while you've been involved in violent incidences, it's probably time to get help. But I just wanted to elaborate on this stuff a bit more and talk about Ionize a bit more as well. So a couple of weeks ago, so The Flash's Ezra Miller accused of grooming and controlling girl as parents ask for protection order. Ezra Miller has been accused of grooming a girl who's now 18 since she was 12 years old. The parents of Ionize have filed legal documents. Ionize, who is from a Sioux tribe, who is now 18, first met Miller when she was 12 and Miller was 23 at Standing Rock. Her parents state in the documents that Ezra uses violence, intimidation, threat of violence, fear, paranoia, delusion to hold sway over her. Ionize's parents claim Miller flew her to London in 2017 when she was 14 and they were 25 to visit the studio Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them because she was a fan of the actor. They also allege that Miller supplied their daughter with alcohol, marijuana, and LSD. Ionize's parents also say they flew to Miller's home in Vermont in January to collect her, but found that she did not have access to a bank card, driver's license, and car keys, among other things she needed to live independently. They also claim to have found bruises on her body, which they allege were caused by Miller. Ionize is said to have fled to New York to reunite with Miller after her parents bought her home, before the pair travelled to Vermont, Los Angeles, and Hawaii, where Miller was arrested several times. Meanwhile, Ionize took to social media to tell her followers she is mentally stable and that her comrade Miller has been a help in her life and she's looking forward to the future. I'd like to make a statement to acknowledge the tragedy that is the narrative of the general public and the assumptions made on my behalf, my family and friends regarding my stability. My comrade Ezra Miller has only provided loving support and invaluable protection through this period of loss. I am now aware of the severity of emotional and psychological manipulation I was made to endure while in my parents' home. I am an adult and I deserve to feel authority in my own body. The 18-year-old also spoke out in a message to Rolling Stone explaining that they are now using the name Gibson and added, "The notion that I have been brainwashed or that I've been coerced in any context is false. My independence from my family in this way is new and complex. Their reaction to my actions is not my responsibility. I've tried to have civil virtual interactions with both of them and failed." So where do you even start with that story? So this girl is only 18 and Ezra Miller started speaking to her when she was 12 years old and started hanging around with her like privately when she was 14. And now they've been hanging around a lot lately when she was 18. Ezra Miller is far older than her anyway, so I'd be highly suspicious anyway if Ezra Miller was hanging around with this 18-year-old everywhere, even if Ezra Miller didn't have this history, and of course recent history, of behaving extremely erratic and violent to people for seemingly no reason. And this gets even more bizarre with the next story we're going to tell you, but in my mind, yeah, it's a clear case of manipulating someone. You get to them early, you act like your friend, you're far older than them, you're far more influential. Ezra Miller is, of course, I wouldn't say a massive Hollywood star, but pretty famous actor. And in my opinion, it's clear the authorities have to get involved more. But then another story that came out about a Hawaiian mother living with them in Vermont, and this article, Rolling Stone, "Guns, Bullets and Weed, Ezra Miller housing 3 young children and their mother at a Vermont farm." And this came out recently. So Ezra Miller has been hosting a 25-year-old mother and her 3 young children at their Vermont farm, a living arrangement that worries the children's father as well as 2 others with knowledge of the situation. Rolling Stone has learned 2 sources with knowledge of the situation expressed concern to Rolling Stone that there is an unsafe environment for children, alleging that there are unattended guns strewn around the home on Miller's 96-acre property. One source, who like the other requested to be anonymous for fear of retribution, recalled an instance where one of the children, a 1-year-old, allegedly picked up a loose bullet and put it in her mouth. But the mother, who like the father Rolling Stone is not naming, claims that Miller had helped her escape from a violent and abusive ex, and Miller helped me finally have a safe environment for my 3 very young children. Ezra's home ranch has been a healing haven for us. They may have firearms for self-defense purposes, and they are stored in parts of the house that the children never go in. My kids are able to relax more into their healing because of the safety and nurturing Ezra has provided for them. The mother and children aged 1 to 5 have been living at Miller's Stamford, Vermont farm since mid-April. The actor met the woman in Hilo, Hawaii, which Miller has been visiting in March. The embattled actor, who's set to star in the new Flash film, has been causing havoc in Hawaii. In the midst of the unfolding crisis, the children's father claims to Rolling Stone that Miller secured a flight out of Hawaii for the woman and her children, allegedly without the father's knowledge. He claims he has not been able to see or speak with his children since their departure. "I got a bad feeling in my stomach. I do want to go get my kids. They mean the world to me." So the mother and father have been at odds for some time, according to Hawaii's courts. The mother pursued 1 domestic abuse case and a paternity case against the father last year. He has denied all allegations, and the domestic case was terminated when neither of the parents appeared in court. So 2 sources confirmed seeing the children there with the mother and described it as a chaotic environment that is unsafe. Video footage from April reviewed by Rolling Stone appears to show at least 8 assault weapons, rifles, and handguns lying around the living room, with some weapons propped up next to a pile of stuffed animals. The two sources also allege that there has been frequent and heavy marijuana use in front of the children, with little concern about proper ventilation. Rolling Stone has also learned that there is a sizable cannabis farm on Miller's property, with Miller's close friend and purported handyman, Whitney Suiters, claiming on social media the two were running a cannabis company called Rebel Alliance Cannabis. So, of course, with a lot of these situations, if you kind of just looked at them individually, it might be a bit more complex, although still really, really gross, right? So this person apparently fleeing from her husband, who she says is a domestic abuser, and they've gone to court over this, although none of them showed up, so he hasn't been charged with it. But then she somehow ends up in a farm in Vermont with Ezra Miller, loads of guns, loads of marijuana, so much so that there's reports that a baby put a bullet in their mouth. Again, in my mind, it's clear is taking advantage of a vulnerable person to do who knows what. It seems like a big ego thing, or they're trying to get more followers or something like that. And then you have the other stuff with the restraining orders, because Ezra Miller keeps talking to like 12-year-olds. And then it seems like Ezra Miller has groomed a 12-year-old native girl in the past, and now they're 18 and they're very, very loyal to them. And now you have this woman who left her husband, who also seems like she's very, very loyal to Ezra Miller for providing her with a safe haven. It feels like if someone who wasn't a rich celebrity was running around doing all these things, they would be in prison by now. And of course, you have the whole element of Ionize being native, and pretty much one of the groups that the US government and police forces and everyone involved who should be looking into this care least about is Native Americans. So it's not surprising it seems so hard for the parents to do anything, especially now she is 18. There's like a lot of things involved in here. It's Hawaii being this playground for rich white Americans to do whatever they want, terrorize local communities, because that's what white Americans have pretty much always done to Hawaii. So in my mind, it's frustrating because it feels like Ezra Miller has done so much wrong that the authorities should step in and do something. But if you have this woman saying that she wants to be there and it's a safe haven, if you have this 18-year-old native girl saying she wants to be with them and Ezra Miller is like a great comrade to them, then I'm not sure how much you can do in terms of the law. But the allegations that firearms are just lying around the place, including in the reach of children, and you have people who've seen this, even a baby playing with a bullet, then I don't know why the Vermont authorities can't do more. I know Vermont has very relaxed gun laws. I'm pretty sure endangering children's lives with guns is probably something that the police should look into. Because I'm trying to make this a bit of a wider issue, there was a good post on H3 Productions about Ezra Miller allegedly grooming this woman, and it just reveals some interesting stats, which I want to bounce off from and talk about this in the context of Hawaii as well. So Ezra Miller has groomed and kidnapped a native woman. This is especially alarming considering the concerning statistics for native women. I'm not usually a woke person, but this issue is very close to my heart. I'm native and I've had a couple of other native women in life go missing or murdered. There is a movement going on right now in the native community. It's called Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. Here are some statistics. Native women make up a significant amount of missing cases in America. This is especially alarming considering Native Americans make up only 2% of the country's population. Native women face murder rates more than 10 times the national average. Homicide is the third leading cause of death among Native girls and women aged 10 to 24, and the fifth leading cause of death for Native women aged 25 to 34. 96% of violence against Native women is done by non-Native individuals like Ezra Miller. In 2016, the National Crime Information Center logged 5,700 reports of missing American Indian and Alaskan Native women and girls, but the Department of Justice Federal Missing Persons database logged only 116 cases. What Ezra Miller has done is terrible. They took a 12-year-old girl and groomed her. Debates on whether the parents should have done more back then is useless. Debate when we look at these statistics. The issue is that Ezra has her now and she is at very high risk of harm. I think this issue is an important time to bring up our movement. And then because Ezra Miller has been involved in Hawaii, and we've been talking about Hawaii a bit, this also extends to Hawaiian natives as well, not just mainland America. So OHA board chair statement on missing and murdered Native Hawaiian women and girls day. Native Hawaiian girls represent a disproportionate number of missing children in Hawaii. Native Hawaiian women and girls represent a disproportionate number of sex trafficking victims, and Native Hawaiians are overrepresented in all reported data from the Domestic Violence Action Center's helpline. women and girls in situations of sex trafficking, exploitation, abuse, and domestic violence are at risk of going missing or being murdered. So May 5th is National Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Day. Native Hawaiians are the indigenous people of Hawaii. These empty red dresses honour the lives of missing and murdered Native Hawaiian women, girls, and gender diverse people. Native Hawaiian women and girls represent 67% to 77% of sex trafficking victims identified in recent studies. So it also goes on to say there is a need to bring public awareness to the potentially toxic intersection in Hawaii of tourism, poverty, sex trafficking, and violence. So in terms of Ezra Miller, we don't know the intimate details. We do know what the parents allege, that she did have bruising, that they did confiscate a lot of her personal property that would allow her to leave Ezra Miller. And in my mind, based on all the evidence, it's a pretty clear case of grooming. Like I said, reminds me of R. Kelly. And of course, because Ezra Miller has a very terrible history of doing pretty crazy stuff, it's clear this person either needs lots of mental health treatment, or they just feel like they are completely untouchable and they're a gross individual who is taking advantage of vulnerable people while pretending they are advocating, I guess, for socially progressive things like protesting for Native Hawaiians with Jason Momoa while terrorizing the Hawaiian community, and allegedly also grooming a Native American from mainland America. And based on all those stats I read you from a Native American person telling you this, it's something that is wider of a larger problem of Native Americans and Native peoples in Hawaii and in mainland America being disproportionate victims of domestic abuse, being disproportionate victims of murder, being disproportionate victims of sex trafficking. It's clearly a problem which shows how much the establishment in America values Native lives, which, surprise, surprise, for multiple different Native populations they genocided and put on reservations, they still don't seem to give much of a shit about them. People like Mark Zuckerberg still colonize Hawaii. Groups like the US military still poison the land, which is so precious to them, and still poison the lives of Native Hawaiians and like white Hawaiians as well. Even US military families, while someone like Ezra Miller can just run around the island and have restraining orders being taken out against them. So anyway, that is it for the video. I thought I'd talk about Ezra Miller while trying to tie it to wider issues about Hawaii and about natives in general. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.